So right now we're working on a shopping kiosk, and what that's going to be is that's an in-world screen that the player can walk up to in any shopping location and actually purchase items from that shop.
For the item kiosk work, we actually took some inspiration from the VMA and the PMA. We started adding those systems in terms of like displaying items, displaying the ship items, and giving the option to select the items that we wish to research. We took, of course, some notes from the commodity kiosk system that we currently have, and adding those two systems to one step actually showing the character loadout and also the vehicle loadout and presenting with items that we have available in that store for that particular, let's say, cooler or engine or missile that we want to browse.
By time we finish the implementation, it's not going to look like the PMA or the VMA on the mobiGlas. It'll obviously have a complete reskin. There'll be additional flow.
When trying to explain how the VMA and the PMA actually work is that we have a request. The user makes a request. We go into our what we call persistency. We make a request for, let's say, player number 1 requests the items that he has on his vehicle number 1. And the server will return to us a bunch of items that belong to that vehicle, to that character. And we then, with those items, well, we basically need to transform the data and make it presentable for the user in a really nice way. How this applies to the item kiosk is, let's say a player goes into a store. He has his Gladius pre-selected. He goes into the store and he wants to see which items apply to his Gladius. Let's say he picks a cooler. Player will need to request to persistency, I want to see every cooler that works on my Gladius for this ship. And the server will return to us all of the items, and then we have the data that we can then present to the player in a nice way in the item kiosk shop. We already have a kind of dynamic platform that we can use to create loadouts. May they be for, let's say, a character, or it be a ship or a ground vehicle or something like that. We can reuse these systems to actually load in, let's say, items that we have available in a store. So going through that steps of following some systems that we already have in place would be the easiest step to actually getting a new system up.
So essentially, the user interface is an extension of the personal manager and vehicle manager, where their navigation scheme is largely the same. However, there's some key differences that we need to take into account for the shop. So, for instance, displaying price, factoring stats and the comparison functionality, as well as the flow for just purchasing in general and selling. So, in terms of the actual skinning of the UI, we've worked on a branding system where this kiosk can basically be in multiple different shops, and what we want to have is the actual branding being reflected on the kiosk, but in the way that it's scalable for us. So if there's 20, 30 shops, 50 different shops, 100 different shops, we can just slot in different branding and styles that will make a big impact on the experience.
We are trying a new kind of presentation for these item kiosk shops. The user will go to the item kiosk. He will pre-select, like, I want to buy items. He will have, for example, his ship loaded in automatically. He will then get to pick the item port that he wants to actually make a purchase for, let's say a cooler. He will then see the one he has equipped on that vehicle, and then he will see a list of items that are available on the store. Every time he clicks an item on the store, he will get to see like statistics for that item, how that item compares to the one he has equipped, and also the availability to buy that item, to actually buy it and equip it to the ship, or to actually just buy it and store it somewhere and do whatever he wants to do with it.
The first thing you'll do on a shopping kiosk is you'll choose whether you want to buy something or whether you want to sell something, because the sell functionality is going to be important for us going forward as well.
The player could actually go to a store, let's say he finds a sweet deal on, let's say, a couple of missiles. And he says like, okay, I have this couple of missiles, but I don't want to equip them right now in my ship. Okay, let me just store them somewhere in what we call the global inventory, and let me just keep it there for a couple of days or so until I actually need that.
The shopping kiosk is obviously important for immersion and allowing the player to access some of the things that are currently outside of the game in the game, sort of in fiction. But it's also important as one of the big first steps for the economy. Certain shops in certain locations are going to sell items that potentially are made from materials that are local. So this is going to tie into the mining system and everything. So a particular weapon is made from a particular metal that is mineable locally. So that's going to be kind of in abundance at this location. But it also, it might mean that they're cheap there, but it also means that maybe you can't get them elsewhere where that material isn't mineable. And then obviously the knock-ons there are, if I go and buy some stuff from there, I could potentially sell it where it's rare. You know, the kind of economy side of things really kicks off when we start to look at supply and demand of things like that to that level.
So where we're at right now is we've had our initial sign-off on the general flow and the functionality that we mocked up in our prototype. So it may not be perfect off the bat, but it helps us to, as artists and as engineers, to visualize what are the exact requirements, how is this thing supposed to work, and how does it flow.
It's all about kind of giving players options. It's speeding up gameplay effectively. It means that they don't have to spend forever looking through different menus, and it also really kind of helps the new players. So someone new to the game might not know that they have to physically buy something, go into a different app in the mobile glass, equip it that way. With this item kiosk, they know, I bought this thing, I'm equipping it to this spot, and it's done. And it's all simple and easy for them to use.
So at this release, we'll have our first iteration of the item shop kiosk, and it will be reflective of our prototyping, our art and implementation. But it'll be the first pass.
So right now we're at the step where you can now purchase items and it goes into your global inventory. We've also got the system working so you can select an item port and it shows relevant stuff to buy. Next up for us is to get shop items and what you own side by side in a list. So that way you can see, this is what I own, this is what I will be replacing, and this is what my options are.
In terms of future development, we will take a look at the feedback that comes through from the player base testing the UI and our internal usability testing as well. So future development will have future iterations. You know, there will be things that we'll want to adjust and tweak in order to optimize the flow and the experience in general. So there are things that we can't really foresee now, and most of the time that is the case. But we've gone as far as we can in the time that we've had allotted, and we have a solution that we think will work well. But it really comes down to how is the player ultimately going to experience this?
Where we're currently at is probably the most exciting part. Is we have base functionality already working. So a person can go into a shop, can actually see the items, can actually buy them and stay with them. So it already makes the call to persistency. The fun part now comes with we are starting to reskin the item kiosks. So instead of having that kind of look and feel of the VMA and PMA, they're going to have their distinct feel of like, okay, this is an item kiosk. It's going to have like theming in terms of stores. It's going to have a slightly different layout than the VMA, than the PMA. It's going to be familiar enough that players know how to use it, but it's going to be a little bit different, not to just reuse assets. It's going to be unique, so to speak.